Chapter 7, The Phantom Stranger. You know, the truth is, I'm so afraid of falling that I barely stand at all. And worst of all, afraid of making a mistake. I end up doing everything wrong. Autumn suddenly took everything into its embrace and generously gilded the trees. A gentle scent of dry grass and light dampness fell upon the city all at once. A small leaf breaking from a tree drifted down, spinning near my face, and fell at my feet. I picked it up and began to examine it closely. Slightly crimson at the edges, yet still green in the middle, it gave me its final dance. Passers-by glanced around and went around me. For some time now I had been causing them fear and heated discussion, and everything that was in my hands, even a flower or a piece of bread, they perceived as a threat. My already somewhat fragile life finally gave way to collapse. The world around me was falling apart at the speed of a shooting star. Only a flash and long glimmers continued to trail after me, a faded celestial body rushing into the darkness of the abyss. I turned around, and there were anxious and embittered looks all around. Rumor had spread in the city that I was a murderer, and all those broken lives by the lake were on my conscience. A sharp pain struck my chest, and a flock of crows rushed upward. My head spun, everyone was looking at me, and I at the flight of dark birds in the gray sky. "Give me wings," my soul groaned. I had become a wounded animal, whose bloody trail attracted only vultures, and that was no surprise. My appearance inspired horror, and for some time no longer resembled a human one. I truly looked more like a wild beast that had broken out of a dense forest. My eyes, long swollen and filled with hot, bitter tears, were unnaturally red, and my uncombed hair was disheveled and stuck out in all directions. It seemed as if my mental state had transformed into a physical burden. My legs grew heavy, and strength left my body. A step, and every muscle was pierced with pain. There was no longer any wholeness in me. My mind had stopped working properly. Dying and lost, I desired only one thing, to free myself from the captivity of life. Having once seen death, it becomes your shadow, begins to follow on your heels, and tries to look inside you. Around me, I stopped noticing the colorfulness of the world and feeling warmth. I was consumed by a cold that reached deep inside and by a prevailing darkness. I could no longer exist like this. The desire to leave grew into an obsessive thought and a plan of action. That autumn day was meant to be the last, but turned out to be the beginning of something entirely new for me. I walked toward the fleeing sun and could not catch up with it. At the foot of the lake, the last crimson glimmer of daylight left me, and the surface of the water was lit by a waning moon. In my hands was a bouquet of red and white chrysanthemums, which I placed at the spot where once lifeless bodies had been found. The old withered flowers, brought earlier, I threw into the dark waters, which stirred slightly from the immersion of the dry stems. The weather was damp and chilling. Steam escaped from my mouth, and at my feet a light silvery fog crept, which at this time of year often settled on the ground. In the distance, the lights of the night city were barely visible, and a dark silhouette. It was approaching quite quickly, and suddenly I became afraid. My consciousness whispered quietly, "This is your death coming." Yes, there was a grain of truth in those thoughts, only then I did not yet know it. "Good evening," came from the silhouette approaching me. Well then, it was hard to assume that death would be polite, but it seemed so. "Good," I answered, a little surprised. What happened next is difficult for me to describe. The feelings that overwhelmed me were unusual and experienced by me for the first time. The dark figure came almost close to me. It was a man taller than me, whose facial features distantly resembled mine, but were much rougher. His dark wavy hair fell onto the collar of his garment, which covered broad shoulders, and his eyes in the depth of the twilight were dark and seemed especially magnetic and bottomless. He possessed an extremely powerful aura. Before him I seemed tiny and insignificant, but at the same time gained a special importance, like air for a human. Next to him my soul grew warm and calm, though my body continued to tremble from the autumn chill. The stranger immediately sensed my agitation and feelings, and therefore quickly took off his warm coat and draped it over my thin one. "Looks like another summer has gone into the past," he added thoughtfully. I mumbled indistinctly under my breath, studying him more carefully. These are the kinds of men you usually draw in your imagination. A large, muscular torso beneath a thin sweater flowed smoothly into narrow, trouser-clad buttocks. He was not death, though there was something in him that was inhuman and deep. "Who are you?" I suddenly came to my senses. "Is it important to you?" He spoke to me as if we had known each other for a very long time. Important? I quickly lowered my gaze, mentally passing through myself the thought that nothing mattered to me anymore, and added, "Probably not. You will leave anyway once you find out who I am, since everyone leaves, and you'd better stay away from me." "Who are you?" He quickly glanced around, and then almost instantly added, "I can assume you're the one who brings flowers here every night, but not the person who is guilty of all these deaths." I stayed silent, not knowing how to continue the conversation properly. A light panic overtook me. For the first time in a long while, I was hearing something like this. It was hard, and I wanted to run away from him. "Please, be silent, I repeated to myself. "I won't change my mind, no. I will do what I planned anyway." "May I take a look?" came a more than strange question from him. "Excuse me," I was astonished. "What do you mean? How so at the dagger in your pocket? But how?" I stood there in shock, looking at my interlocutor, who almost imperceptibly pulled out a small blade from me. "It's foolish of you to think about death." He drew the blade across his palm, after which he threw it into the depths of the dark lake. Blood ran from the wound, or maybe it only seemed that way to me. "Fool!" It suddenly and sharply escaped my lips. "What are you doing?" "Oh, I like that tone more." With his hands he cupped my face and looked intently into my eyes. Strangely, I did not feel either stickiness or the wetness of blood. "This is for your own good," he added, letting me go. I grabbed his hand and looked at the wound, which was not there. Stunned, I stared at him for some time and then burst out in anger. "What kind of tricks are these? Your stupid joke scared me." "So I scared you." He turned away lightly, but spoke to me in a calm and even gentle voice. Usually that's how one speaks to objects of adoration. "And you didn't think how you might scare someone by doing to yourself what you were going to do?" "No," I lowered my head guiltily and tried to justify myself. "No one would care. For everyone I am only a murderer. I can't even earn a living and write articles for newspapers because no one gives me a place for publication." "That's all?" His eyebrows lifted slightly. "Change your pseudonym and send your articles by post. I think everything will work out, dear Lady Tenebris." He smiled at me. That day became my birthday. That is how I began to write again, with a new name, and my world changed. He made me believe in the future and look into myself. After all, what I had lived through gave me no grounds to end my own path in such a way. On the contrary, all the events that whirled around me should have pushed me toward new beginnings and accomplishments. Lady Tenebris, I absorbed the depth of those strange eyes, again and again replaying his last phrase. Everything bad was running away, hot blood flowed through my veins, and my heart was beating in a strange way. It seemed I had fallen in love, though I did not want to admit it. I closed my eyes, and my consciousness stepped into dark non-existence. That night I slept more soundly and longer than ever before. Perhaps I even remained in that state of sleep for more than a day. The magic of drowsiness carried me to the mountains, to a green meadow and fragrant flowers. I wandered endlessly beneath patterns of white little clouds and the bright expanse of the sky, and when I finally woke, I could not at once come to my senses or understand where I was. There was no fear, and so I did not hurry to get up. Nearby, in the fireplace, a fire crackled, and two large dogs sat there, resembling wolves in appearance. Their bright eyes watched me attentively, but they showed no signs of aggression. The door of the veranda, in which I did not remember how I had ended up, was slightly ajar, and so a light white curtain swayed from the breath of wind that burst into the room, while I still lay on a large couch wrapped in fur skins, quiet and calm. I tried to preserve these sensations, but could not. They were almost instantly broken by a wave of emotions. Jumping to my feet, I turned my head in different directions, realizing that I would not see my phantom stranger. One of the dogs growled a little, and I flinched. Loneliness covered me with even greater force. Now I was completely lost within myself, and by the fire of the struggle for survival, I continued to drown my heart in tears, whispering words of suffering into the void. Taking out a pencil, which I almost always carried with me in my pocket, I wrote a few lines on a white napkin lying on the table. For the first time in my life, the words did not connect with each other, but I was not particularly worried about their vividness or correctness. I simply tried to express a certain stream of thought rooted in the infinity of my mind. Breathing heavily, I quickly pulled on my coat and the boots standing nearby onto my bare feet and slipped through the doorway outside. The morning frosty air struck my face and slipped down my collar. I quickly fastened up and looked around once more. Nearby, as before, there was no one. I was in a once-abandoned summer house near the lake that had become fateful for me. The dogs were still sitting by the blazing fire, and I almost ran past the slope and several alleys. At home, I dropped into an armchair and closed my eyes. Butterflies of happiness seeped into me and formed a dance of feelings I had not known before. It became somehow especially sad, yet very warm. For some time I searched for him, and peering into the darkness, hoped that the night would give me his silhouette or take me with it. Together with the phantom stranger I found myself, but at the same time I lost myself. My heart lost its peace. Wandering through deserted streets, I looked at passers-by and drifted into the most dangerous corners of the city. I had not moved far from the edge of the abyss where I had been, and so I continued to tempt fate. My soul slowly drowned in melancholy and longed even more strongly for salvation or for death. Sometimes it seemed to me that I saw him, or perhaps it was my imagination quietly mocking me. In the end, I stopped searching for him, realizing that only if he himself wished for a meeting would he find me, wherever I was, because having entered my consciousness, he had lost his peace. And indeed, that is what soon happened. We met face to face on a dark, deserted street. Rain mixed with snow poured over us. I stood under an umbrella and simply kept silent, while my heart quietly beat deep within my soul. Even then I was completely calm, because there was nothing left in me to destroy. My world had long turned into a field of charred remains. It was not the same stranger I had met before, though he was still the one who had come out of the darkness, but this time he lacked his former confidence. It was as if he had lost a part of himself and could not look at me without a tremor in his gaze. In an instant I understood. His consciousness had cracked, and his former convictions had gone into non-existence. He looked into my face only for a short while, as if convincing himself of something, and without saying a single word, left. I did not follow. I was tired of trying to catch the wind with my hands. For the first time, I watched him go and let him go in my mind. I had to live on and find at least a small thread of meaning for my own existence. Now, intoxicated and laid bare like an addict, I searched for sustenance, which I began to find in the grayness of the world, in the decay of flesh and the destruction of the mind. I could no longer endure such a life and simply plunged headfirst into writing. Articles slipped easily from under my hand. There was more than enough material for my creations. People, as before, continued to fall ill, disappear, and die. The principality was drowning in vices and suffering. The frightened population, more than ever before, needed words of truth, which even behind sweet expressions could not be concealed. A young boy from a not very well-off family readily agreed, for a small fee, to deliver my articles to the editorial office. They were snapped up eagerly, and so the earnings I received from the publisher were quite enough for living and food, but I was still bursting with dissatisfaction. For all that was not little around me, I had nothing. I even took a position as a volunteer in one of the hospitals for the seriously ill, but I did it not because I wanted to help people, but simply because of my own selfishness, which fed on suffering. For some time now I had been intoxicated by suffering, fear, and death, which soaked the walls of the city. It became calmer for me when I knew I was not the only one who suffered. Dregor was consuming me. A dark spider of the ugliness of existence crept into my soul and wove its web. Thread by thread, alien sensations appeared in me, from which I was slightly frightened. The fire of defiance against moral laws flared up, and surprisingly, I enjoyed that new thing that was being born inside me. From everything I saw, I drew inspiration and strength for my own existence. It seemed that the lives of the townspeople should have changed. But no, everything was only getting worse. Even fear began to take on some kind of absurd and tangible form. People more and more often turned to various religious symbols, hung their houses and living spaces with anything they could, and that, in their opinion, kept evil forces away. On one of my shifts in the hospital, one of the nurses approached me and hung a string of garlic around my neck. "Why this?" I asked her in surprise. "What do you mean, why?" she rattled off. "Don't you know, garlic repels evil spirits, and besides, you're taking the night shift today." "So what of it?" I recoiled, took the string off myself, and placed it on the table. "What's wrong with you? Put it back on," she suddenly snapped at me. "Things happen here at night that make your hair stand on end. The patients, you see, become even more unhinged than during the day. You'll soon see it yourself." Snorting, she leaned a little closer to me and added in a whisper, "If I were you, I'd lock myself in the nurse's room and not come out until morning." "Is that what you do on your shifts?" My eyes widened slightly. "I have to," she gave a crooked smile, trying to hide her fear behind an awkward grimace. "Still, I'll leave you the garlic," she winked and hurried away. I sank into silence, turning her words over in my head. They were incomprehensible to me. It was strange to hear such things from her, a former employee of the psychiatric ward for particularly difficult patients. Sitting down at the table, I began to realize that I felt very tired. It seemed I lacked fresh air. The creak of a window frame reached me, which slightly frightened me, but suddenly I realized that I had simply gotten up mechanically and opened the window myself. The only surprising thing was that I had done it completely unconsciously. Freshness struck my face and I woke up. A crash sounded in one of the wards. For a place like this hospital, it was quite normal. So, armed with several doses of sedative, straps, and an additional source of light, I went toward the noise. Several patients were behaving very violently, trying to leave, and so I had to fasten them to the hospital beds. Everything seemed to settle down, and even, surprisingly, became completely quiet, as if earplugs had been put in. The full moon looked through the transparent curtain, and I could not understand what was happening to me. Maybe I had lost my hearing. I tried to make noise myself, but I heard sounds muffled, as if the objects around were absorbing them. It began to drive me mad. I felt no pain, although my body did not fully obey my consciousness. As quickly as I could at that moment, I went out into the corridor, empty or someone standing near me. I try to come to my senses. I rub my eyes and see two silhouettes, my patient and a woman completely unfamiliar to me. What is happening? I cannot understand or utter a word. I am paralyzed. They pass by me and I do not move. Some kind of haze around. Neither fog nor steam at my feet. My anger grows and suddenly a surge of energy. "Stop!" My voice broke into a scream, but I did not know what to do next. The stranger turned to me and dug her fingers and nails into my neck. Blood appeared, and I felt a drop crawl downward. What I did next was almost instantaneous. From the pocket of my robe, I snatched a syringe with a strong sedative, and injecting all its contents into the stranger, I knocked her off her feet, trying to bind her with straps. She thrashed and shrieked as if it were poison instead of medicine. Now noise came from everywhere, a lot of noise. The hospital turned into chaos. Many patients began leaving their wards. Even the calmest ones, those who did not need to be locked up or tied down, went mad. They tore at their skin and harmed themselves. I felt the stranger beneath me still struggling and screaming. The injection was affecting her in a strange way. Everything had slipped out of control. She threw me off with such force that, flying several meters, I landed on my back. Now every part of me hurt. I was half conscious when I saw her face and red eyes above me. Her head moved like a cobra's. She hissed and stretched her tongue toward me. His scent, she repeated. I had no strength to move. I could only watch. She convulsed, but still freed herself from my straps. She not only behaved unusually, but looked different. A large metal ring in her nose, many colored drawings on her body, strange clothing, and short light hair slicked back. Perhaps now such an appearance would not surprise anyone, but at that time it was more than eccentric. I was completely alone in the entire troubled ward. I had stayed here at night many times, but nothing especially frightening had happened. and now something was happening that even 5 people would not have handled. She kept repeating the same phrase. His scent. What was it about? Who was he? What scent? I blacked out for a while, and when I came to, she was no longer there, and the corridor was empty. Everyone had returned to their places. I tried to stand up, my body ached, but there seemed to be no serious injuries. That night, I still had to go through all the wards and bandage and treat the wounds that the patients had inflicted on themselves. It was not a mirage, but what exactly was happening, I did not understand at all. The shift was more than difficult. I was very tired and frightened. In the morning, I was replaced by 2 daytime nurses. I did not go into much detail, but told them that for personal reasons I would be absent for some time. I know one thing, nothing like that had happened to any of the staff. Only after that incident, the patients began to disappear without a trace. Not die, but vanish somewhere, even from tightly locked wards. The first to disappear was the girl whom the stranger had come for. I took up my own investigation. It was hard for me to come to terms with everything that was happening, and so, over several months, I managed to gather a rather large collection of legends about Dragor and uncover some facts. Almost the entire winter I stayed for long hours in archives in the library, studied case histories, went out at night, and visited various dangerous places. No, I was not looking for death, but I wanted answers, and so I followed her. Only the most surprising thing was that no matter how close I got to her, she ignored me and slipped away. Wherever I went, everything fell silent. Wherever I intruded, everything passed without incident. Sometimes it seemed to me that someone was watching me, and sometimes that I was being avoided. I felt as if there was an unknown force with me, protecting me. Ordinary townspeople forgot about the incident near the lake and showed friendliness toward me. I became something of a hero, a woman who was not afraid to step forward and prove herself even in the most unusual and difficult situations. I was engaged in active social activity, which took almost all my time. Sometimes I wrote letters to my mysterious stranger and left them in that very summer house. I no longer indulged in hopes, but simply communicated on paper, as with an old good friend. We still did not meet, but this correspondence ceased to be one-sided. After some time, I began to receive replies. And once, when spring embraced the lands and the weather changed, becoming soft and warm, I, as always, came to that very place with an envelope in my hands. The last rays of the sun slid not only along the walls, but also across the silhouette that stood nearby. My body trembled. It was him. The witch looked around in confusion. She stopped her story to Eric, but her memory was still there. A few steps, and she fell into the embrace of her mysterious stranger. She felt danger, but could not control herself. What perhaps should not have happened happened. Who wanted it more is unknown. The trap snapped shut. Those few days spent together were different, and at the same time so ordinary that they should have drifted away at the speed of light, but they did not. As suddenly as he appeared, just as suddenly he disappeared. For a long time she told herself that nothing had happened and that her feelings had remained the same. But no matter how strongly she convinced herself of indifference, with the same force the poison of incomprehensible feelings seeped into her mind. The witch looked at her listener. Yes, she felt friendliness and a certain interest toward him, but nothing more. She did not want to speak about moments of happiness or about who the stranger truly was to her. After that spring, we did not see each other for a long time. I tried to leave him letters, but he no longer answered. The witch came back to herself and looked at Eric. She did not tell the most important thing, about the connection that was between them. Months passed, and the seasons changed. Icy air penetrated every cell of my tired body. No clothing could shield me from the cold anymore. I stood and looked at the wet stones and the reflections of the daylight. Loneliness among people had long destroyed me. There was no joy and nothing that could bring me back to life. With a beating heart, my soul was dead. My fire had gone out. Behind all that pain that was born inside me, I did not understand what was really happening. Could I feel something sincere and warm now, or only the curse of ordinariness and the grayness of existence? My smile, which everyone saw, was artificial. If something burned in me, it was the flame of fear. lack of understanding, that is where I lost myself. Without a bridge to reality, I endured only the burden of meaninglessness and being lost in chaos, and no matter how I tried to find myself, around me there was only emptiness. Quiet, silent, no joy, no anger, complete detachment and closeness. I entered my modest dwelling. With difficulty I reached the bed and, curling up, sank into drowsiness. I was shivering, perhaps I had a fever. Complete emptiness and helplessness. A lonely, unnecessary person within four walls, and only fresh air and noise penetrated through the slightly open window. Even my own breathing felt foreign. Who am I and where? Will I be able to endure such an existence for some time longer, or will I fall into the abyss of madness? Waves of despair covered me so often that it seemed I would somehow sink into them and never surface again. A gentle breath brushed against my neck, and I shuddered. My eyes slowly opened, and I realized it was already night. Darkness surrounded me. I felt a little better. Sleep always severs the full connection to reality. The blur between the two worlds has its effect. After a nightmare, waking up brings immense relief, or, otherwise, an acute awareness of the world's transience. I could not recall my dreams or whether I had slept at all. Perhaps I had simply lain in a foggy state for some time. The witch briefly looked at Eric Grain and fell silent again. Another memory came to her mind, one she did not want to voice. It did not belong to her, but to the one with whom she still shared great secrets. He had long stopped receiving letters from her. Sadness increasingly overcame his mind. Longing, anxiety, dissatisfaction, and anger. Something unimaginable was happening. It had long seemed to him that he could no longer feel anything like this. The past somehow repeated another act on the stage of his life, and interest in existence slipped away at the speed of light. His surroundings, and even the one he had let so close to himself, no longer brought him pleasure. But what had been amusement for him turned out to be something unimaginably important. Dark wavy hair, gray-green eyes, and a sincere smile now lived in his cursed soul. Before, he could not have imagined that this mortal woman would awaken a part of his humanity. Pure indignation and anger arose at the mere thought that she would be happy without him, or with someone else, since he could no longer imagine a future without her. He did not know whether she was capable of forgiving him for the pain he had caused her, but to do everything possible to win her again became his goal.